the timeless past.
The dust was the first thing Maya Caldwell noticed every morning and the last thing she tasted at night. It was the fine brown silt of failure, coating every surface of the farmhouse, settling in the lines on her hands and clouding the vast Kansas sky. The Caldwell farm, once a thriving patchwork of emerald green corn and golden wheat, was now a study in brown and gray. The rains had forgotten them, the bank had not, in the recent death of her father. John Caldwell had left Maya utterly alone, the sole inheritor of a dying dream. At 28, she felt ancient. The grief for her father was a raw, open wound, but it was tangled with a bitter resentment that made her feel sick with guilt. How could he have left her like this? The machinery was old, the fences were collapsing, the foreclosure notice was tacked to the kitchen door, a crisp, white harbinger of the end. She had 1 month. 1 month to produce a miracle or watch the land her great-grandfather had tamed be sold off to strangers on the courthouse steps. And then there was Echo. The horse was the cruel punchline to the tragic joke her life had become. In his final week, when every dollar was precious, her father had driven their old truck to counties over and returned with him, an old Swaybock with a coat like a faded map and eyes like clouded marbles. He was completely blind. Maya had stared, dumbfounded, as her sick father had gently led the animal down the ramp. "His name is Echo," he had whispered, his voice weak. "He's a good old soul, you'll see." Maya hadn't seen. After her father passed just days later, all she saw was another mouth to feed, another drain on resources they didn't have. Echo became the symbol of her father's final, bewildering decline, a testament to a mind that had seemingly lost its way. The horse was a financial burden and an emotional one, a constant physical reminder of her powerlessness. In the first week, she tried to sell him. She called a local livestock trader, a man with a weathered face and calculating eyes. He came, took one look at Echo standing placidly in the parched paddock, and laughed. "What am I going to do with that, little lady? He's blind and ancient. Ain't worth the fuel it took me to get out here." Her second call was to a horse rescue. They were full. "We have a waiting list a mile long with healthy animals," a sympathetic voice told her over the phone. "I'm so sorry." So Echo stayed. Trapped by circumstance and a reluctant sense of filial duty, Maya began a grim routine. Every morning, she defilled his trough with water she hauled from the nearly dry well and portion out a scoop of feed that cost more than her own groceries. And every afternoon, to ensure he got some exercise and didn't injure himself in the dilapidated paddock, she would clip a lead rope to his halter and walk him. Their walks were funereal processions across the dead land. With the blind horse following her lead, Maya began to talk. At first, it was just frustrated muttering. I don't know what he was thinking. Buying you. Going to lose everything. Everything. But the horse's presence was so calming, so utterly non-judgmental, that her muttering soon turned into a torrent of words. She told him about her memories of the farm and its glory, about her mother who had died when she was a teen, about her overwhelming fear of the future. Echo would simply walk beside her, his head low, his ears swiveling to catch her voice. He would nuzzle her shoulder when she stopped, his soft, velvety muzzle a comforting pressure. He never startled, never panicked, trusted her implicitly, a blind creature placing all his faith in the tense, grieving young woman who resented his very existence. And slowly, impossibly, something within Maya began to shift. She started to see past the uselessness. She saw the quiet dignity in the way he held his head, the gentle soul that shone through his sightless eyes. She began grooming him, her hands working through his coarse coat, and the rhythmic, repetitive motion soothed her frayed nerves. She was no longer just fulfilling a duty, she was caring for a friend. The anger she felt toward her father began to soften around the edges, replaced by a deep, aching curiosity. He had been a smart, practical man his entire life. There had to be a reason. It was during these walks that she first noticed Echo's strange insistence. No matter which direction she started in, he would eventually, gently but persistently, pull her toward the northwest corner of the property. This area, a 2-acre patch of rocky, unforgiving ground, was the farm's dead zone. Not even weeds grew there with any conviction, but Echo was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. He would walk to the very center of the rocky patch and stop, lowering his head to sniff at the baked, cracked earth, standing perfectly still for long minutes. "There's nothing here, boy," Maya would say, tugging gently on his rope. "Come on." She chalked it up to a strange equine habit, a quirk of his sightless world. But day after day, it was the same. He would lead her there to that specific, worthless spot. With only a week left until the auction, the finality of it all began to set in. Maya started the heart-wrenching task of sorting through her father's belongings. She packed his clothes, the scent of him still clinging to the worn flannel, and boxed up the books he loved. In the bottom drawer of his heavy oak desk, beneath old tax returns and seed catalogs, her fingers brushed against a worn, leather-bound journal, his work journal. She sat on the floor, dust motes dancing in the shafts of late afternoon light, and began to read. The early pages were filled with her father's neat, concise script, detailing crop yields, rainfall measurements, and market prices. But as she moved closer to the present, the entries became more sprawling, more personal. He wrote of the drought, of his mounting debts, of his profound worry for her future. Then, the entries took a strange turn. Started writing about local history, about old Osage Nation legends of the area. He'd pasted in copies of old maps and geological surveys. He became obsessed with a local myth, a story of a whispering spring that was said to run deep beneath the ground, a hidden river that never ran dry, even in the worst droughts. October 12th, he wrote, "The geologists say it's impossible. The water table is too deep here. But the old stories are so specific. They say the water sings in the rocks, if you know how to listen." Maya's heart began to pound. She flipped toward the end, her hands trembling. The last few pages were written in a shakier hand, the script of a man whose strength was failing. November 3rd. The diagnosis is final. Not much time. I have to find a way to help Maya. I can't leave her with this failure. The spring is the only way. But how to show her, how to make her believe. November 5th. I remembered old man Hemlock's stories. About his grandfather's horse, a blind mare that could find water anywhere. He called her a dowser horse. Said sight just gets in the way. Said she could feel the vibration, the whisper of the water through her hooves. A long shot, a fool's hope. But it's the only one I've got left. The final entry was dated the day before he brought Echo home. November 10th, I found him, gelding from the same bloodline as Hemlock's mare. And he's blind. It's a sign. I spent the last of our money on him. Maya will think I've lost my mind. She'll be angry. But maybe, just maybe, when she's ready, she'll learn to trust him. He can't see the broken fences or the dry fields. He only sees the truth beneath. Trust him, Maya. Let Echo lead you home. The journal fell from her lap. It all crashed into place: the useless horse, the inexplicable purchase, the relentless pull toward the rocky patch of land. It wasn't a quirk. It was a map. It wasn't a mistake. Maya scrambled to her feet and ran from the house, her boots kicking up clouds of dust. "Echo," she screamed, her voice cracking with a mix of hysteria and hope. The old horse lifted his head in the paddock, his ears pricked. She didn't bother with the lead rope, just threw open the gate, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Okay, show me. Lead the way." As if he had been waiting for this exact moment his entire life, Echo turned and began to walk, his gait steady and purposeful. Maya followed close behind, her hand resting on his back. He didn't hesitate. He led her straight across the barren fields, directly to the northwest corner, to the center of the rocky, forsaken patch of earth. He stopped, lowered his head, and let out a soft nicker, nudging the ground with his nose. This was it. This was the spot. Grabbing an old spade from the nearby fence line, Maya began to dig. The ground was hard as iron. For an hour she worked, her muscles screaming, her hands blistering. The sun beat down on her, but she didn't stop. She dug past rocks and dry roots, driven by a wild, desperate faith. She was 6 feet down, covered in sweat and dirt, when the spade hit something different. Not the hard clank of rock, but a dull, wet thud. She dropped to her knees and clawed at the earth with her bare hands. The soil was cool. Then it was damp. Then it was mud. She plunged her hands deeper, and then she felt it. A cool, impossible upwelling of water. She pulled her hands back and watched in stunned silence as clear, Clean water began to bubble up from the hole, gushing forth, spilling over the sides, turning the dry dust around it to dark, rich mud. It was the whispering spring. It was real. Maya knelt in the blessed mud, laughing and crying, letting the life-giving water run over her hands. Her father hadn't been a fool. He had been a genius. He hadn't left her a legacy of debt. He had left her a legacy of miracles, delivered by the gentlest, most unlikely of messengers. Echo stood beside her, his head lowered, nudging her shoulder as if to say, "I told you so." Maya wrapped her arms around the old horse's neck, burying her face in his mane, her tears of sorrow finally turning into tears of pure, unadulterated joy. The farm was saved. Her future was saved. Looking out across the thirsty fields, she no longer saw a prison of dust. She saw a canvas of possibility, waiting to be brought back to life, all thanks to a blind horse, and a father's love that was strong enough to reach back from beyond the grave.